Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to Oxygen Not Included. This is a game that we are revisiting in, I guess, 2023. I really enjoy this game. It's one of my favorites. I think Clay as a designer, you might even recognize the art style. They've done things like Grifflands, probably Don't Starve might be one of their most well-known games. This is probably a close second. I think everything they touch is great. They always do different genres and they do it really well. There's not a lot of indie studios that do that. 11-bit comes to mind. They do that as well. You know, they constantly pivot genres and do something wild and new and fantastic. Anyway, I'm gushing, but it's because it deserves it. What is Oxygen Not Included? Well, if you're unaware of this game, it is an ant farm colony simulator. It's incredibly hardcore mechanically. Even though you've got all these goobers just staggering around, and it's, you know, comics to the 11th degree turned right up in the charm department. It is very, very hardcore colony survival where your dudes start at the center of like an asteroid or a planetoid, limited starting resources and oxygen, and you essentially have to build and tech your way out, potentially tap resources, get to the surface, build rockets, go to other places as well. It has some very advanced but yet gamified physics and mechanics. I suppose the way that gas propagation works is of note. Let's just go in here, go survival, classic. Now, classic is fine. Spaced out is probably the best way to play it, and that's with the DLC, right? So if you do end up picking this up, the DLC is pretty good. However, there's nothing really wrong with the classic mode. Essentially what classic does, actually, does it explain it? Smaller starting asteroids with resources distributed. Essentially, spaced out forces you out of your starting planet. With classic, your starting planet is pretty self-sufficient, has a lot of resources across the board, you can't really go wrong, but spaced out really does squeeze you and it forces you to go out there and engage with more of the game's mechanics, is probably a great way to put it. Anyway, I'll just finish my thought, but things like the way that gas systems work, you have gases that are higher in density or lower, and then they will pool and flow in such a way that you can actually build systems like chimneys, cooling towers, heat sinks, all sorts of stuff that work around the way that the game's liquids, solids, gases all just interact with each other in the world. It's really, really cool, but don't let that scare you off. You can figure it out, but it's pretty hardcore. Okay, starting asteroid. That sounds pretty cool. Nearby asteroid. Story traits. Oh, okay. How about we don't touch anything and we just press go. Go sounds good to me. But yeah, one of the first things that you sort of want to think about is you probably want to tap a water source if you can. And you probably want to think about, in the sort of early to mid junction, is how are you going to deal with oxygen, because you will run out of oxygen in the beginning. We'll just take these default boys and boyettes. Oh, it's good to be playing this again. Anyway, okay, so first things first, this is the gas overlay, and that's the density of oxygen. You can see very breathable, right? But over here, oh, I'm not getting a pop-up, so that's probably vacuum, to be honest. Whereas this is just lower dense. You can see there you go, little bits of carbon dioxide. And if you were to unpause it, you can see them propagating. Now the carbon, right here you can see, it's a cool system, I want to explain it. No gas can occupy the same unit. Oh, you see how the mouse has like little build squares, like grid squares? You can only have one gas in each unit. See how there's carbon dioxide there? There's barely any. And there's barely any oxygen there. And what they do is sort of in ticks, they'll swap. This is how it travels. So they never inhabit the same space, but they flip, right? And I can tell you now how this is probably going to play out. The carbon dioxide wants to do this. It kind of wants to sink because it is a higher density. Whereas the O2 will probably want to stay up there. So you'll probably be able to just watch this and you'll see the little red things kind of trying to make their way out. They're sinking into here. So that carbon dioxide is probably just going to sit there and it's very happy. And actually what's going to happen here is these are going to sink into there and the density of this is going to grow. So here you've got 134.7 grams. There you go. And it's going up as it goes in there. Anyway, so there's a sort of there is a system. There's a method to the madness. What are we going to do? Let's start digging out some spaces. I build in my own idiosyncratic fashion, as will anyone that plays this sort of game. And my fashion has been known to trigger people because I'm not doing it the right way. I'm not doing it the way they want. To which I say, phooey. I'll build how I will, thank you. Oh, look at this. I'm just going straight into habit mode. Okay, so you've got some things up here nudging you along. No oxygen generator, that's okay, because here's the other thing is oxalite. This is a very rare mineral that you only really see in the starting biome, right? And that just generates oxygen. It degrades into oxygen, right? It's a video game, don't overthink it too much, but it will run out. So we have a sort of assistance starting oxygen generator to get the ball rolling. This is the heat map. Now, this is what will probably kill most colonies in the early days. It takes a while. The starting biome has ideal conditions. But you can see we have quite a hot biome over here, and you can get cold ones as well. Now, everything has a specific heat capacity. You can see here we have abyssalite, which is quite high. Where can we have a look? 0 germs, properties. There you go, specific heat capacity, 4.0, right? Whereas if you go to, oh, you can even look at water in it, I suppose. Well, water's not a great example. Algae. Thermal conductivity 2, specific heat capacity 0.2, right? So the abyssalite's going to hold a lot of heat, but the heat sources are probably like geysers. You get natural gas geysers, things like that, steam geysers, and these are great ways to tap infinite resources. However, they also create infinite heat, right? And so the game tends to trend towards heat death. It's not a super closed system. You can get up to space and you can eject waste and all that in there. But, you know, if you're thinking about systems and how I have heat generators in there, you can sort of start to understand that this is not going to stay green forever. This will propagate. This will heat up because the heat source will never let up. It's infinite. So one of those things, now you don't have to think about it for a long time, but it is probably the thing that kills most colonies is that they overheat, and and by the time the damage is done, it's a bit hard to turn it back. No outhouse built. Well, let's do that. Let's build an outhouse. Little room here. I've run out of building mats, so you need like the dirt and all that to build. Your dudes do have little RPG stat sheets and stresses and health, and you got to look after them, morale, bladder, all sorts of things. You can give them jobs. You go to duplicate skills. You can, as they get a skill point, you can allocate them into a sort of category. The morale system is incredibly inspired. You can see that they have 2 morale sort of by default. Duplicate 1, they get 1, and New Hope as well. So I suppose that one probably fades after time. But if I give them a skill, they get a negative morale chip against it. It's a balancing mechanism. So at first it's not a big deal. But if I want to make this dude a hazmat digging expert, look at that. And what that will do, that will drain his happiness very fast, and he'll have a mental break. Start weeing, vomiting, crying, all the things that you do when you have a mental break. And the way to offset this is improve his quality of living. Give him like cool housing, furniture, meals. High quality meals is a huge thing. So there's the sort of the loop, right? The incentive to look after your dudes, basically. But at the moment, they're just gun numbers. They can eat mush and just crappy nothing food, and they will be happier for it. All right, we're going to put an outhouse here, and then what we're actually going to do is we're going to put a wash basin there. You can that arrow means every time someone passes through it, they will engage with it, so they will wash their hands, which is important because when they go to the toilet generates food poisoning disease, right? There's all different types. Now this needs water as well. That's what that's upset about. Insufficient water. We've got water down here. Let's actually do that. Let's tap the water all the way down. Building like that's a bit dangerous. You can give you guys hypothermia. So if I pull up the germ overlay, I guess it's called, these are really different types of germs. In the early days, food poisoning is one you'll deal with. All it will do is make you guys sick and less effective and slow. It won't kill them, but it's a pain in the bum, all right? And so you don't want your dudes to be sick. And this thing just represents a generator. So every time someone goes in here and has a poo, they're going to generate germs. And the reason that we have this basin there is a bit of a filter to try and catch as much as possible. Slime lung is the next thing you'll probably deal with. Can we see some in any of the biomes around here? Sometimes one of the earlier biomes will have slime lung in it. And that's dangerous because if they inhale it, it gets in their lungs and you can't really wash your hands out of that scenario. Might try and catch someone going to the toilet. Down they go. Can't really do all of them at once. Gotta be careful as well, see, because this is making like an unbreathable chute. See these, that's not a health bar, that's a holding my breath bar. And eventually they'll go up and want to get their breath back. Because as discussed, CO2 sinks. Okay, cool. So we're into the water. Let's see. I like to build, I call them Jeffrey's tubes underneath. 1, 2, 3. Bang. 1, 2. Ideally, I would like to build there because of my own idiosyncratic leanings. So, plumbing, pitcher pump. That's where I'd like to put it. Cool. Where is it? Plumbing, pump. Alright, so that's the main reason we're going down here. It's a hand pump that'll create water bottles, which we can then transport up to this and fill that basin manually. You can get into plumbing systems and automation, you know, power generated, pumping systems and piping systems, right? But for now, see now it's full of water. And then when they wash their hands, it'll start filling up with dirty water. So we'll have to have a sort of reservoir for getting rid of that. Anyway, I might continue my little Jeffrey's tube under here. Doesn't seem like much. Now I call it a sump, but essentially, see, you can already see manifesting. There's no CO2 up here, or hardly any, because it sinks down to the bottom. So I create like a sort of CO2 sump under the base as a cache for CO2, because we don't really have the capacity to process it or anything like that in the early days. Now, what else is the game sort of poking me about? No oxygen generator built. Colony requires food source. Well, food source we could do, but we need metal. That's the bit of the problem at the moment. There's none here. You can see it up here. Copper ore will do just fine. So what if we potentially fashion out another sort of space here? And then we can copy that. I think that'll do nicely. Get up there and get some copper going. You can see the density of the oxygen is much lower here. Here you go, so Bert's having a poop, and they're having a dinner break. So what we're going to do is, you'll see when he finishes up, it'll generate germs, right? Now, he will wash his hands on the way out, which for the most part will clear a lot of it. There might be a tiny bit on him still, and there's a bit here as well. But at least, you know, this is a pretty rudimentary way to try and contain as much of the germs as possible. There are issues, you know, you can get a queue going. If someone's using the sink, another bloke will just walk straight past them. He's just going to fall asleep in his own filth. Good work, Devon. But trying to contain it's a big thing. You got to be careful, because if it gets in the water, that's the end of it. You're going to have to filter the entire water source because it's polluted water. So that's a whole problem. Things like this, how I'm letting them sleep on the floor, is fine. However, you'll see when they wake up, if we click on them, they've got a sore back default. Athletics -1. If we go to skills, where are your athletics? There. -10% run speed, right? So every little bit adds up. So the better you treat your dudes, the better they're going to perform and work generally. Also of note, you can see this printing prod. Next print in 1.5 days, and it's charging the yellow on the side. That's how you get new dudes. They don't breed or anything like that. You can opt not to take a dude and take a gift instead, but this sort of gives you it's almost like a loot box you can get a dude out of, right? Okay, we've got metal now, which is good, because we want to get a microbe musher. We'll pop that there for the moment, and that needs power. This is a very rudimentary way to generate food. What we're going to do is we're going to get a basic sort of tier 1 power generator, which is a hamster wheel, basically. Now, you've got to be careful linking hamster wheels straight into the power source without a battery buffer, because you can get yourself in this feedback loop where they just run the power non-stop. They just keep powering the machine. So what we're going to do is we're just going to build like a battery bank up here. Now, we're talking about heat death and all that. All the machines will start generating heat, batteries especially. So you give it a little bit of time and your batteries will start hotting up your base quite a bit. So maybe you want to come up with a system for that. Create a cooling system. Maybe you want to make these tiles out of abyssalite or whatever, right? So that they can absorb the heat a little bit better. Maybe some sort of, yeah, like I said, like it could be liquid cooling, air cooling, you know, trying to increase surface area. That's something I've played with, sort of like a heatsink theory. All of it will work as long as the science and fundamentals is sound. Anyway, so let's hook the batteries up. Like that. Alright, so once that's done, they'll start jumping on the wheel and charging. And you can see the batteries will have a threshold on them, I believe. No, maybe it's on this. Battery recharge threshold 50%, right? They'll run it until it's fully charged now, but that's more that if the batteries on the network ever drop, because you can only have so much load through cables, so you have to split your networks and that, otherwise you'll start blowing things out. Once it lowers below your threshold, 50%, they'll jump back on the wheel to recharge it, right? So it automates. Okay. So, plug the old microbe musher in. Now, what I like to do with this thing in the beginning is you've got the mush bar. An edible, putrefied mud slop. Preferable to starvation, but only just barely, right? The ingredients are dirt and water, and it's -1 quality gristly. Now, none of your dudes have particular food demands at the beginning, so you can do that. So what I'm going to do is go forever, and I'll put it on priority 9, so this will almost always be manned. And then I'm actually going to hit enter, which tells them to turn the machine off. Now, the reason for all of this is, here's your calorie count for your colony. If that drops down, and it'll turn red if you've got not enough, like less than a day's supply or whatever. When that happens, I'll turn this machine back on, because the draw of power and resources and just generally using this machine is not ideal. You don't want to do it if you can help it. So you don't want it running all the time. You only want it running when you have to run it. Everyone will have their own system, but that's just an example of like a basic little system of how to set it up, and that's how Scarlet does it. So there you go. All right, put little doors for aesthetic. What we got here? 4 down. Be something like that, won't it? Stop pressing buttons, Scarlet. Alright, cool. Then I wouldn't mind reorganizing and moving that, but I don't have the technology to do it yet. How's our oxygen looking? It's okay. Alright. Now, this sort of has a built-in natural drain to it, but you can run vents and systems all through. You can come up with your own systems. We don't have an oxygen generator. The sublimation station is not for this biome. That's something that plays with mud, which you don't get here. If we started on a different planet, you would use that, but I digress. Let's put an oxygen generator right here, and we'll run power. So what this does is you put algae, and it might be water as well, actually. converts large amounts of algae into oxygen, right? Again, algae, you can see we've got a lot of it here in the starting biome, but once you move out, it becomes a little bit more rare, at least without without slime. We were talking about slime lung, right? So this is how you would get more algae, but you have to risk serious contamination as well. Yeah. So again, these are very tier 1 techs that will get you through the starting biome, but then you have to start coming up with interesting systems. Electrolysis for oxygen is viable. It's where you basically turn water into oxygen, but then you have a byproduct of hydrogen, which is very lightweight, so it will float up into the top of your base, so you might need some sort of chimney or re-intake at the top, and it propagates very aggressively. So if you don't have a plan for that, you will suffocate your base, essentially. All right? Now what are we going to do? We've got dudes that are idle, building the oxygen generator. So getting into the tech tree is probably a smart move, right? Let's see. Where would I put another room? I guess for the time being, we could try something like that. And I don't know, I'll put like a little temporary door there. I'm pretty sure this oxygen stuff still works even if you dig it out. Like it will still, put in a box or whatever. So I want to put research stations in here. Because that's kind of where we're up to now. Run through there. Not dissimilar to something like, I don't know, RimWorld or something like that. And the technology tree is overwhelming. So here we are at the beginning, and then you can pull it down to there. Essentially, it's left to right tiering. Let's see. You can see that you've got basic research for a lot of things, but it very quickly turns into multiple types of research. You need more advanced machines and potentially qualified dupes, you little dudes, colonists, that you will have to allocate as scientists, for example. Basic farming is a sensible thing to start with, right? And we've got rudimentary plumbing, a little bit of medical. Things like this are like water coolers and that sort of stuff is for them to hang out after they finish work. Ventilation. What else we got here? A bit of decor. It really depends where you're trying to go with your colony. I mean, you probably want to research everything. Basic farming is a good, smart place. The sooner we can start getting farming plots down and rely on them as opposed to the microbe musher, then the better for all. Alright, there we go. So they've jumped on the research there, and that's going to start draining the batteries. So we're going to be in a bit of a feedback loop for the moment. Now if you press K, now K is the sweep button. There is a decor button. Decor overlay. You can see that light generally makes things nicer, but all this crap line on the ground is messy and they don't like that. So what you can do is put like a storage bin, and they will, well, he's putting stuff in the research machine. I believe it, what does it use? I can't remember. Consumes dirt to research. The dirt's a bit of a basic currency. So this dude is going to be torn and overworked while they run this machine. You can see immediately my colony's sort of come to a bit of a standstill for the sake of research. So we might just leave that and we'll let them clean it up and get everything nice and tidy. But you can see now we've researched some other stuff. So we've got the algae terrarium, which eats CO2. It's a very rudimentary way of dealing with a CO2 problem. What you can do is, I talk about my sort of sump system down here. Maybe we'll put a terrarium there, right? So if this is the sort of crossover line. See, we're managing to keep a lot of the CO2 below here. And as it peaks over the top, this will gobble up some of that CO2. Or at least that's the theory. What else do we get? Food. We've got the ration box, so I could probably reorganize all that. We've got composting, which is probably a good idea, to be honest. Let's do that. Plonk that there. And we've got the planter box as well, so we'll have to come up with a farming sort of network. Oh, here we go. Choose blueprint. So you can get care packages or you can get these dudes. I'll take you, you'll do. But you probably want to have a think about their specific skills and who you're bringing in for, you know, put your aces in their places, that sort of thing. Let's put the ration box there. This is more just idiosyncrasy. What I will do, there is a method to the madness of this colony, which I'll explain. And if you've seen me play before, you know exactly what I'm doing. I'll draw a blueprint of how it's going to go. So essentially, we're going to run a ladder down here. This is a big modular block. So I can have a repeatable structure. So, right here, this is a little bit odd because that's a large structure. But this is your basic modular block there with the Jeffries tube underneath. And I'm going to run a Jeffries tube above. Oop. Right? So essentially, they serve as access corridors for free travel. We wouldn't normally have doors going through here. And then you have these ladder bays for access. You might be able to see it. So yeah, there's a symmetry. 4 little rooms in the center. There'll be 4 rooms here. There'll end up being 4 rooms here and then another ladder sort of thing. Then you can build this above, below, and around. And I find that, now yes, it's only one wide. It doesn't leave, there's later technologies like, you know, vacuum chutes, or maybe you want to run ventilation and all that up and down. Like, I understand that this doesn't necessarily work in the later game, but in the early game, it's a great little citadel that handles a lot of your sort of gas flow control issues. I guess they're just going to keep building all that. Now, I guess for food, I could put... And again, the symmetry, right? We'd put another oxygen generator over there. You see, the same next to the... In fact, while we're at it, you'd put them up here as well. Probably wouldn't put the algae terrarium up there, because there shouldn't really be errant CO2 up there. But maybe now you're seeing a little bit of the madness turn method. I'll have to reset all this up. All 9, so you want to keep your food locked up. Forever, 9, off. Yeah, it's come together. I still haven't built them bedrooms because you can see what I really think of my labor force. Not a lot, basically. But anyway, that should give you a bit of an idea, right? And this is just a tiny little scratching the surface of this game. It's totally graspable, and yet it has a lot of complicated systems. I would compare it closely to RimWorld, even though RimWorld is much more survival, combat, definitely not science-based, right? This leans a lot harder into building and engineering systems within a scientific sort of closed system, pseudo-closed system. But at the same time, it has a lot of common with RimWorld. It can be a bit obtuse, a bit difficult. I still remember the first time I played RimWorld, I bounced off it way back in the day. I found it to be overwhelming and didn't really hold your hand as a newbie. And this game, I feel, is the same, right? However, if you invest a bit of time in figuring it out, and hopefully videos like mine help understand it a bit better, this could be a time sink. This could be a game that you play for 6 months with nothing else, easily. Anyway, team, that's my thoughts on Oxygen Not Included. I don't even know if I mentioned it. I'm pretty sure it's on sale at the moment as well. So if you want to go over to Steam and check it out, you might be able to pick it up on the cheaper. At the very least, put it on your wish list, you know? Alright, team, might just leave it there for the time being, and I will catch you guys on the next one.